What's going on, Rebel Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Talk podcast. I'm your host, Zach Moreth. As always, I'm here with Daylan Flowers, and we just wrapped up a day of coordinator interviews. We got some practice content as well over at the rebelwalk.com for you guys to check out. But we wanted to kind of tune in on YouTube and give you guys some insight as to what we saw and heard from Coach Pete Golding and Charlie Weis Jr. as well. Two guys who've done some really great things at Ole Miss. Obviously, people tend to side with Pete a little bit more than Charlie Weis Jr. as of recently. But staying on that topic, Pete actually signed I think it was a $2 million plus deal today to stay at Ole Miss. It's a huge contract extension, making him the highest paid coordinator in the country, and a very well-deserved one as well. Pete, you see what he does in the recruiting platform, just some incredible things for Ole Miss. And then you look at last year, he sends 5 guys to the NFL draft. So some special stuff from Pete. But before we get too knee-deep into what Pete and Charlie said, I wanted to just catch you guys up on a few practice things and kind of what we saw today. The first thing I want to start out with is that the offensive line, after seeing it in person, Daylan, has a lot more depth. We saw guys like Percy Lewis out there. It looked like Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams weren't even playing as much as they usually would.
Yeah.
And true freshman Devin Harper was stepping up. Obviously, Patrick Kutas from Arkansas stepping up. Percy Lewis, like Delano Townsend, these are guys who, may have slipped your mind as a fan. I know they slipped mine. So to see them out there healthy, moving around has been fantastic news. Just kind of want to gather your thoughts. We'll start on the offensive side, Daylan. Anything stand out to you that was different today from previous days or weeks?
I think a lot of those guys that you just mentioned just kind of not participating for whatever reason it may have been. I think that, Jaden Williams, Diego Pounds, some of those guys. I don't even think, if I'm not mistaken, Traylon Ray was out there today with along those guys, but really wasn't participating. I wouldn't mark that as a concern or saying they're injured. I just think that right now, I think the offense is trying to protect certain guys, especially on that offensive line, because health is the most important thing right now. Being available is the best availability. And I think within those moments of guys like you mentioned, PJ Wilkins, Devin Harper, allowing them to get a little bit more reps, but as well building the cohesion within guys that are still kind of competing for starting spots within the offensive line are really important right now. So just maybe taking a step back from those guys and allowing a few different guys to kind of step up today and do some different things was really important. I thought the wide receiver room really caught my eye tremendously. Caden Lee finally got out of that black no contact jersey today for the first time since, I want to say, like the second or maybe the latest third practice, but other than that, he's been in that black no contact jersey throughout fall camp. So it was good to see him, in the red jersey. He's been moving at full speed, participating in drills and scrimmages and practices, regardless of the jersey. But, they have obviously not put any hands on him. And today he was kind of moving around and doing a little bit more within the offense. So that definitely caught my eye. And just the full cohesion of the offense, regardless of, I think from the viewing perspective of myself from the media, and I think the fan perspective, the offensive line obviously is the biggest question mark within the offense. But, it seemingly still, it seems to have a good rhythm so far. And again, this is just a viewing portion that from the media perspective, we only get to see, certain parts and throughout the week. But the up tempo is seemingly, still really comfortable for this offense. And with Austin Simmons being here for some years now, that doesn't look to be much of a drop off, which is important for the system that Charlie Weis wants to run. And I think wholeheartedly Lane Kiffin wants to run. I think there were times last year that they had to deviate from that, up-tempo offense because simply they weren't able to run the game officially, which is something that Charlie Weis Jr. talked about in the pressers today, and which we'll get into a little bit later. But being able to run the football impactfully for this Ole Miss offense is important to move the ball upfield, play the up-tempo game they want to play. It puts them in positions to then, play that play action pass, dump it over the middle of linebackers, and get upfield, and sometimes not have to put themselves in positions of being in the red zone and struggling in those moments when they can just get a 45-yard play action touchdown pass from a guy like Harrison Wallace or, Caleb Cunningham, et cetera, Deuce Alexander, those quick guys that can get in the middle of the field and make some things happen in the open field. those things are going to be important, but it relies heavily on the run game. So the offensive line has that big concern, but I will say this, and something else Charlie Weis talked about today. It's just the total maybe improvement from the running back room to this year compared to last year. And I know there were so many head scratches about what went on in the running back room last year, but it truly does look like just a different vibe, a different energy from that position group this year. Keywan Lacey and Logan Diggs presumably kind of look like the 1 and 2 guys within that room. Damian Taylor and Dominic Thomas have definitely also getting some reps, and I've seen Shakai Mills-Knight, move a little bit forward throughout the last couple of practices. But I would say as of now, Keywan Lacey and Logan Diggs look to be the main 1-2 punch within that room. And I think they both are versatile and bring a lot to the offense that Logan may be is a good pass blocker, and Keywan may not be that guy, but he's a little bit more elusive. Can get in between the gaps a little bit better. It's a little bit better of a receiving back. And Logan Diggs is more of that pass blocker, power rusher. When you're on the 1 or 2 yard line, you need a score to give it to a guy. That's who you're going to give it to. So I think there's a great versatility within the running back room as well. And I think the offense is slowly and seemingly finding its rhythm to get to where that up tempo wants to be. And I think as this week goes by, there is so much in store for preparing for this weekend scrimmage, and just to get another full pledge of game experience and game speed ready for this offense, which is going to be really important this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how Austin Simmons adjusts. Obviously, didn't have the best performance last scrimmage. There were a bunch of rumors, and then Lane actually confirmed it in his press conference on Monday. Real quick with the running backs, you mentioned Logan Diggs and Dominic Thomas. Dominic was a guy I'll be honest, kind of forgot his name was, getting thrown around here at Ole Miss. And, it just goes to show that the depth is, like Daylan said, very different than last year. Let's all say a prayer that Deuce Alexander isn't playing running back late in the season as Micah Davis was against Florida last year. Hopefully those head scratchers can be avoided. So even if a guy like Lacey or Diggs goes down, you have Dominic Thomas, a couple guys behind them as well, to kind of go in and get the job done. Moving into the defensive side, a lot of big names across the defensive back room who we saw play today. Antonio Kite continues to prove that he's going to be a big playmaker on this team, especially there, against really good receivers on opposing teams. Nick Cole, who we touched on briefly in the last podcast, he's been at Ole Miss for a while. He's continuing to show that he will be a vital part of the defense. Kapina Gushikin, that's a mouthful. Hopefully I'm saying it correctly. The Washington State transfer, going to be an absolute beast. Dante Core, true freshman. Pete Golding even complimented him today in his interview, but he was out there with that first team defense, getting some really good reps, and he's going to be really productive as the years go by. Granted, he stays at Ole Miss. And then Ricky Fletcher, Chris Graves, Jalen Braxton. So, we talk about it. It was definitely a concern heading into this year, but as we record these podcasts, these names just keep popping up who you might even forget about. And Pete said it, but to be able to combine those true freshmen with the transfers and then intertwine them all with the guys who've been here for a couple of years, it makes this scheme, extremely effective. Whereas that was not the case a couple of years ago when Pete had just arrived at Ole Miss. That was kind of the gist of practice, I would say, Dalen. Anything else you have to add there?
There wasn't much from a viewing perspective for the defense today, and not saying they didn't have a good day. It's just the sets were kind of quiet within the viewing portions for the media, and I think in a way I'm grateful for that because of able to be able to speak with Pete Golding after today's practice, and just the insights he was able to give us from his perspective about a lot of different things. But it was your first day back, and I'm glad you were able to kind of see different guys, especially Ricky Fletcher. I know we had that conversation today just about his presence and the ability for him to be able to do so many different things. His hand placement is really good to push receivers out and off their routes is really impressive. His athleticism is really well. His ability to pick up on the offensive plays and read those and get to points where he needs to be to kind of shut down routes for wide receivers. He looks really good. And I think not only him, but the guys that have been here for a few years are really now showing the portions of how good they know the system and how good and the abilities that they have are. And they speak to the volumes not of only the players and their persistence to not leave and go somewhere else because they weren't playing for a year or two, but as well how good and how great these defensive coaches and Pete Golding are at selling the job and also putting belief in their players that, hey, this may not be your turn, your first year, your second year, but come year 3, come year 4, you're going to be a big name for this team and for this defense. And these players are seemingly, I feel like every year, but these players buy into Pete Golding. And he spoke to us in the press today, and you understand why when you hear him talk. When he speaks, you want to go run through a brick wall for him. And that's a guy you want to play for. That's a coach that you believe in, and that's a coach that has your back and is going to put you in the best situation possible every time you step on the field. So I think the secondary is coming along really well. I think that there is a collection of competition in the safety positions. He talked about Jalen Braxton today, who throughout the season you may see him at the strong safety, at the free safety. You may see him at the corner position like he was a lot at Arkansas. I think having his flexibility is going to be huge for this defense. Kapina Gushigan, Sage Ryan, Nick Cole, a lot of those different guys that may not be superstars at that certain point, but do different things really good, which brings the totality of this defense to have a lot of versatility, which I think is going to be huge. You need depth. You need some big guys. You need some guys that may be a little bit smaller but can move a little bit quicker and faster than the big guys in the SEC, because you're going to face so many different things from opposing players in teams in the SEC. So when you have those guys, it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, because if a team is playing this package this game, or they're playing this scheme this game, and they may change it up, or the team next week is playing something different, you have the available options to confine with those differences and really scheme to a strong amount. So I think the defense is really going to be able to put this team on the map this year. It's just how, number one, of course, how do they stay healthy, and number two, how do they perform based off one another. And when I say that is, you look at the secondary, you look at the linebackers, you look at the front seven. Do these guys allow each other to do what one guy does really good and then what this guy does really good? Or do they all try to be superstars and be Superman and make everything happen within themselves? That can't happen. And I think, and I do believe that these players have bought in, and I know that's not going to happen, but when things get hard, it's easy to try to be Superman and do everything. But I think these players truly just have to continue trusting their coaches and know that these coaches are putting them in the best position possible to be successful at the end of the day.
100%, Daylan. And diving even further into the Pete Golding press conference, he touched on it, but the three guys leading the way in the middle between TJ Daugherty, Todd Chambers, and Andrew Jones, all three of them were captains of their defenses last year. You could say that TJ kind of worked hand in hand with Pooh Paul, but at the end of the day, he was the one getting those play calls. He's the one setting up the front seven. Todd Chambers doing the same at Missouri State. Andrew Jones getting it done at Grambling State. So now you assemble three elite level leaders, high passionate guys with high football IQ, which is a Pete Golding term if you guys have listened to the press conference. But they're going to make sure these guys are in check, not only the linebackers, but the secondary, and obviously the front seven as well. But Pete Golding, one of the things, Daylan, arguably one of the favorite things that he said all day today was that adjustment between his first and second year in high school and transfer portal recruiting, but finding guys who go to Georgia, getting off the bus, locked in, ready to go.
Yeah.
He made a point, right? That first year when we went to Georgia and got our asses handed to us, for those who remember that top 10 matchup, there were guys taking photos of the stadium, surprised at how big it was. And then, Pete realized the mindset had to change. And that's when they went and got that elite level transfer portal class filled with SEC guys who were used to playing in 100,000 people stadiums, right? Prince Uman Mielen, Walter Nolan, TJ was a guy they got in the previous class, but he came from Clemson. A bunch of dudes, Trey Amos from Alabama, SEC talent between guys who are used to this, and we're going to bring leadership and experience. So you put that all together. Now you have Ole Miss as a program who not only is up to par with Georgia, but beat them last year.
Yeah.
You would start to recruit a little more, even at a higher level. So really just some promising stuff. Daylan mentioned it, but I want to run through a brick wall listening to Pete. The guy knows way too much about football. He's such a nerd. It's awesome. It's inspiring to listen to as an Ole Miss fan. And just kind of some of the things we touched on earlier, Ricky Fletcher in the secondary, Antonio Kite, who Pete recruited at Alabama, Chris Graves and Jalen Braxton, four guys who he expects to be heavily involved in that rotation. And then moving up front, he was extremely complimentary of Cam Franklin.
Yeah.
Mentioned, Cam didn't really have a lot of the tools coming to college, but between, hand involvement, being quick, almost a comparison to Jared Ivey, he's really put it
Yeah.
all together. And he's a guy who I believe Pete referred to as an every down player.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final note that I had from his presser was that get ready, folks, because Suntarian Perkins is going to have himself a hell of a season. They're going to move this kid around when they get comfortable in their defense. He's going to be off the edge. He's going to be playing linebacker. He's going to be violent. And I think he's going to take that next step, almost like Princely did last year when he came to Ole Miss. You're going to see Perkins being so disruptive, especially on pass plays. I think he's going to get a lot of sacks. He's going to be active. He's going to be everywhere and everything that he has been for the past 2 years, but more. He's getting stronger. He looks bigger. He's obviously recovering from that shoulder surgery he had in the offseason, but he looks great. And again, it brings me back to the spot. We're talking about all these different guys, and all I can do is get excited to watch them wreak havoc on the field. Just kind of, got my takeaways. I want to hear a little bit about what you thought, Daylan, listening to the guru himself, Pete Golding.
Yeah, it's just refreshing to hear a guy like that in today's system. I just think that there are, so many outlets from the media perspective, so many social media perspectives that it's you don't really get that from whether you're covering Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin or you're covering another head coach at another school. But when you're able to speak to the coordinators, you get a different just mindset, I guess, and different totality. And in hearing Pete, there were so many things that stuck out. I think number one, I guess for me, was just this was a family move for him and his family a few years ago when they came to Oxford. This was something he talked about today and in a previous interview as well, maybe a week or two ago with Sports Talk Mississippi, that for him personally, this was his final move. This was a place here in Ole Miss at Oxford, which he wanted to call home for the rest of his career. And that means so much, I think, for an Ole Miss fan when you're hearing your defensive coordinator and Charlie Weis kind of mentioned that too today as well. Just saying how he felt at home in Oxford. This was like the longest place he had been since his father was the coach at Notre Dame. So it really is refreshing, I feel like, from a media and a fan perspective when, in today's world of so many moving pieces within coaches and players, to hear a coach just be like, this was a family move for me. And I think Ole Miss fans really need to grasp on the point of these coaches, whether they make mistakes or not within the play call, sometimes in your opinion, they seemingly feel really happy here, and I think that builds on obviously what Lane Kiffin has done, and being here for year 6 now, and now his family's here. This entire coaching staff, I don't think they lost a single coaching coach this year from their staff, and they retained the entire staff from last year. That speaks volumes. That speaks volumes about the culture. That speaks volumes about just the standard that is here at Ole Miss. And building off that, he talked about it, Pete Golding, just when they're recruiting guys, like you mentioned, in the portal or in high school, they have goals. When they played Georgia a few years ago, coming in that through into his first, was that his first year. They didn't really, feel like they had the guys at that time that were set for the moment. This was a move when Lane Kiffin came to Ole Miss. He didn't just think, this was going to be a pushover job. He wanted to make Ole Miss a national brand, which he has done. This is a team behind Georgia and Alabama for the most conference wins in the last 5 years. This is an Ole Miss team that has consistently now been in the ranks of one of the best teams in the country every year. This is now a national brand, and Pete Golding understands that, and they have recruited strongly to continue to raise the standards within that point. One of the things he said was, you're going to see some new faces and you're going to see some new names, but the standard's going to be the same. The results are going to be the same from last year and in the year before, and that speaks volumes. When you kind of you feel like, how does Pete Golding keep getting these guys from an opposite fan perspective? I see it so much on social media from LSU fans, from other schools in the conference, and their fans. Why are these guys going to Ole Miss? It's because coaching stability is huge, and these guys have formed those bonds and relationships, and they know what it's like here. They know what it's like within this system, within this program, and that builds great things for players coming out of high school, and even guys that may not originally committed to Ole Miss, like Caleb Odom, but didn't have the success he wanted to at other schools. And now when he got in that portal, he already had those relationships within the program at Ole Miss. So he made it an easy choice when he got in the portal to know where he was going to come. So I just thought those were two things that stood out about Pete. Just his just real love and at home feeling here in Oxford, but as well having a great, mind and goal whenever recruiting guys and knowing what he wants. That's huge. And being able to work within his system here with Lane Kiffin and of course Nick Saban, you can definitely tell he's learned from some of the best in the game.
Pete is easily one of the best coordinators in the country, and I'm just happy that he's at Ole Miss, man. I mean, that's truly, he's an absolute beast. Flipping over to the other side, Charlie Weis Jr., a guy who people tend to be very mixed in terms of emotions regarding coaching style, the decisions he makes, and no one really knows if Charlie or Lane is making the play calls. It feels like when things are going great, Lane's making the play calls, and then the second things go bad, it's Charlie Weis, Charlie Weis, Charlie Weis.
Yeah.
Whatever the case, again, he's a Lane Kiffin guy. I think he's going to be here in the long run as long as Lane's here, granted that he doesn't get a head coaching job anywhere else or maybe another OC position. But he's settling in, just like Daylan had mentioned. He's finally finding a home, just like the rest of these guys on the coaching staff. And from the fan perspective, as well as a media person, I thought he did a really nice job today. He kind of instilled some faith into the offensive line and running back room. It's exactly what we mentioned earlier, but there should be no scenario that Micah Davis or JJ Pegues is lined up at running back. Obviously not those players, but the version of that. Like that scenario should not even happen with this team. The depth is at a different level. Offensive line and running back room have guys at the top who are even better, as well as guys at the bottom who can fill in and play and still be super competitive. And then, we've talked about it for basically since the springtime, but this receiver room is disgusting. There's 5-6 dudes who are going to be absolute playmakers who are going to see a lot of time on the field. Stribling, Odom, Wallace, Ray, I'm Cunningham. There's so many guys, and this is just a part of the team that I think Austin Simmons is really going to thrive on. But it starts and ends with the run game, as well as the offensive line being able to provide Austin Simmons a little bit of time. And that was, kind of a problem. If you guys saw, Jackson Dart made a nice little comment from the Giants. He said he was really grateful for his performance on, I think it was last Saturday, in the offensive line, because that was the most time he's had, I think, ever in the pocket, was basically the way that he phrased it. So we got to find a way to get Austin Simmons that time. The offensive line and running back room has to step up, or else the wide receiver talent doesn't even really matter that much. The final note from Weiss's press conference is that Austin Simmons is emerging quickly across the clubhouse and in the locker room. Jackson Dart was more of a vocal guy, more of, the high and mighty leader who we all think of when the word leader pops to our head. But Austin Simmons, kind of a more quiet guy, but he's still able to manage all these different relationships across the team. He has a great understanding of the playbook, and he knows how to motivate the players as well. So, yes, Austin's doing great things on the field, but off the field, the coaches are recognizing it. He's being himself, and he's being a leader at the best of his ability and doing a great job, in that assignment as well. You guys have to remember that this kid should, be a freshman this year, Daylan?
He's 19, so yeah, freshman, sophomore.
Yeah. It's ridiculous what he's doing. So very excited to see him, watch him kind of rally the troops as we get closer to Georgia State kickoff. I want to hear your perspective from Charlie Weis.
I think that just from the fan perspective of Ole Miss fans, I think obviously, just being on social media and speaking with fans, they want to see more. I think there were just so many things that went on within the offense last year, whether it was injuries, depth chart, just overall play calling performances as well, that, really made Ole Miss fans scratch their heads this past season. But at the same time, I've always said I think it was really important for Charlie Weis Jr. to return for the development of Austin Simmons. He's been here. This is his third year here now. Which is crazy to say about a 19-year-old now that's now starting quarterback at an SEC school. But Austin Simmons is a really intelligent guy, and I think Austin has built a great relationship with Charlie Weis because of the time spent, but as well, they understand one another, which is really important between a coordinator and a quarterback. And he mentioned it today, Charlie Weis, just the helmet to coach communication and how important that's going to be for Austin. Because here's the thing. I think that, and fans have gotten a little complacent over the last week since last week's scrimmages and hearing the news that, Austin didn't have the best day and et cetera, et cetera. I think it's easy to forget again that this kid's 19 years old and mentally he still has a lot of growing to do. He hasn't started as a full-time starter yet. This is his first year starting. He's 19 years old. And those moments are going to come where he's going to throw an interception. He's going to maybe fumble the ball while running, or he's going to throw a overthrow when a guy's wide open, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, why? But those things happen. It's the game. And I think, again, as I said on our last episode, Zach, I think this past weekend scrimmage was important. I think that those mental errors happening will now allow him to sit back and do some things differently, and also do the things that he already does really good, well, and just continue to gel at those things. So, Charlie and Austin seemingly have a great relationship, which was, I think really important for his development. But also, Charlie wasn't deviating from the facts that things struggled last year in terms of the run game, and he was really honest about that and open about the fact that he thought this year, just overall, he thought the running back room was better, and had a little bit more efficient depth. There were plenty guys in that room last year. I just don't think there was an effective usage of the guys that they had. And then when later parts of the season, when guys, went down, in that November, late October parts of the season, then things really got critical for Ole Miss. But I think Charlie Weis was really honest today about just the availability of his running back room, the health of his offensive line room, and prospectively how he's kind of watched his position group coaches do and what they've done well. So I think to watch out for what he does this year is seemingly just put Austin Simmons in situations to be successful. And, there are going to be different moments where it may not look like a Jackson Dart offense anymore, because it's not, and I think that we're going to see some of the same similarities, but I also think we're going to see this offense now be monumented a little bit more to what Austin Simmons does great. And I've seen that throughout fall camp so far. And I think that's going to be important, not only because of his, young style of play. We have not seen Austin Simmons again play a full year, but as well, a lot of these guys, when you're in those moments with a young quarterback, you don't want to have him out there in those positions that is going to set him up for failure. You don't want to go to Athens, Georgia. You don't want to go to Norman, Oklahoma. You don't want to go to Kentucky and consistently just putting Austin Simmons in moments that is not going to set him up for success, especially early on in games. You want to come out of those games and really just get him feeling good, get the momentum going up, and truly put him in positions early to start him off good. So I think Charlie Weis is, obviously being being criticized heavily by Ole Miss fans for reasons. But I think right now he's in a good place because of Austin Simmons. And I think once that, that motion continues, then I think things are really going to change within this offense this year. And I think Charlie Weis understands the game plan at head for Georgia State.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, man. We're slowly creeping up here, approaching that 2-week mark before Ole Miss takes on Georgia State. Just some other news in college football. I'm really pumped, Daylan, because obviously big noon kickoff, Texas, Ohio State is that day. But for Central Time, it's 11 and not noon. So we get an extra hour to watch that game before we make our way to the Grove and, get ready for this Ole Miss kickoff. But yeah, we mentioned it. Charlie Weis and Pete Golding are two of the best in the game. Ole Miss fans should be fortunate to have them. And hopefully Charlie can prove himself a little bit more with Austin, who he's been able to develop a relationship with for quite some time here. That was really all I had on the day today. We're going to come shoot some content to you guys over the weekend, probably maybe closer to Monday after Monday's practice. But stay tuned to our socials. We'll have another practice tomorrow with more player interviews. Anything else you have for the fans, Dylan?
Oh man, got another viewing practice tomorrow, Friday at 9:15, 9:30 around that time. So we'll see some more things, and obviously they have their scrimmage Saturday, so we'll do our best to get some of our words and comments and thoughts out about that as well. But season's quickly approaching. You know, it'll be here before you know it, and just really excited that football is almost back officially.
I'm so pumped, man. All right, guys, we appreciate you tuning in. As always, leave a like, subscribe, check out the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs, and be sure to tune in next week to the next episode of the Rebel Talk. Hotty toddy and go Rebs.